Hey readers, I'm Danny.
And I'm Leandra, and we are not reading for content.
This is a monthly book club podcast dedicated to reading in depth and leaving no plot point unturned. Each month, we read one book over the course of 3 episodes, basically reading 1/3 of the book at a time. Feel free to listen along, or better yet, read the book with us. Our first season of the book club has the theme of genre blends. A list of books and the club schedule will be in the description.
Hey everyone! Welcome to another month of reading. We are introducing our fourth and final book when it comes to our first season of genre blends. This time around, we're going to be reading The Hitchcock Hotel by Stephanie Wrobel, but before we get too excited, we do have some housekeeping that we need to make sure that you're aware of. With this being the final season for, or should I say, the final month for our first season, that means we have 4 more books to introduce to you and a brand new season concept. We've been telling you about this as we were discussing the Games Gods Play, that obviously this is our translations month, and you could have found all of the titles in the description. But now is the time for us to say this aloud on the podcast that our first book for translation season is going to be Inkheart by Cornelia Funke. Now, this is really switching things up because it is a middle grade fantasy, the first in a series, and it's translated from German. We're pretty excited about it. I think it's going to be an interesting comparison to the adult works that we've been reading, and we hope that you will join us as we start off on a brand new season. I can't wait. I feel as though it's almost like celebrating New Year's again. Now that we have that announcement, that confirmation out of the way, let's get into this episode and start, as we always do, with a bookish bite. So, behind the scenes, Danny and I were ruminating, trying to figure out what we should discuss in the lead up to the Hitchcock Hotel. And Danny, you came up with a really great one, so I'm going to steal it and I'm going to pose this question back to you. And the question is how much investigation do you do before entering a book? So, for instance, if you have a hardback, you will have the front cover, the back cover as well, that has all of these, different authors or publishers championing the title. And then obviously there's the inside flap that provides us with the synopsis. Do you go that far? Do you read the first paragraph, the first page, the epigraph? How do you end up entering a novel, or do you just go completely blind?
I've done a little bit of everything. I would say that it's probably dependent on the genre of the book for me, because I think if it's just a flat fantasy, like epic fantasy or high fantasy, whatever we're reading, and it's there might be some subgenres, but the primary genre is fantasy, I will read everything and anything that I can. So the front flap, the back flap, I'll read. I don't read reviews before reading a book ever, typically. Um, but I might check and see like which of my bookish friends have enjoyed the story. Like I might do some investigating there. I have found myself pulling away from reading an entire synopsis for mysteries and sometimes also for horror, which is funny because this book is both that we're reading this month. And the reason I say that, and it hasn't been a problem with every single book that I've read that is a mystery, but I think that sometimes a synopsis can spoil certain things. And I've only ran across it a couple of times, but I remember, I wish I could remember the title, but there was one particular book that spoiled something that was at the 50% mark of the storyline. And I was like, I just kind of feel like that's not necessary to put in a synopsis. And so, yeah, I do think it's very dependent for me on the genre, because I feel like certain genres are more spoilable, if that's a word,
Mm.
than other genres. What about you? What do you do?
Yeah, that's a good point. I will say that maybe also the length of the novel too is a big factor as far as what ends up being a spoiler, and also like how soon you're going to get to that point to remember it was a spoiler, because obviously if it's
Yeah.
like a 5, 600, 700 page book, you may there's just a lot more happening, whereas like for instance a mystery one, also it's very plot driven, so you are trying, like the plot points are important. So
Yes.
if something happens in the
Yes.
plot 50% in, so that I totally get what you're saying with that. And I'm someone who really likes to go in pretty blind, and it's not because I'm fearful of spoilers. I actually, depending on what it is, I don't really mind. I've read mysteries where I know who did it. So, and I feel like that's a pretty extreme spoiler to just be
Yes.
fine with. So I know I'm built differently. I'm not like most readers when it comes to that, because I get that that's not fun when the fun of it is to be surprised, to see a twist, to have this revelation that you weren't expecting. So that definitely makes sense. I think for me, I just like going in blind because I'm a lazy reader. I don't, I'm just like, I don't really like, let's just go in. I 100% judge a book by its cover. If the cover it looks amazing and just gives me a certain tone, I feel like that's something we don't talk about enough, is that you can 100% get a certain tone and atmosphere from the cover. It's definitely
Yeah.
selling itself to you. So there's that. And I have found myself more often than not, it's not intentional, but I will be perusing and seeing the different authors who are promoting a title. I understand that there are times when the reason the specific authors are chosen is because they have the same publisher. So the publisher is just reaching out to those that they're also, campaigning for. But I think it gives you an inkling. I've bought books because it's looked intriguing to me. I've investigated a bit further, and then I've seen that two or three authors that I've loved or respected have, said something lovely about the book in the back. And I'm like, well, if they're saying positive things and promoting this author, I feel as though there's a good chance I should like it. And so I've definitely done that before, even though authors can totally have different tastes in books than what they write, which is something apparently I have a hard time remembering. But I think it's interesting to consider with the Hitchcock Hotel, because we are arguing that this is a horror mystery. I'm not sure if we're going to be correct on that because you and I haven't read the book yet. Huh? Isn't that a crazy aspect of this podcast? But what's interesting is that there are a lot of what I would argue very clearly thriller writers promoting this book. I mean, at the front of on the front cover, we see jaw dropping from Riley Sager, a man who is very well known in the thriller genre. We also have Alex Michaelides. I know that he's really popular, if I'm even pronouncing his name correctly, with like The Silent Patient. The Fury, I think, is very funny that it's on the back of the book because I'm pretty sure that tanked. So kind of awkward that that was mentioned with his name. AJ Finn, I'm pretty sure, is a well-known thriller writer as well. So the question is this going to end up actually being a thriller, or are we going to be able to say that we are satisfied at the end of this book that it is a horror mystery genre blend?
Yeah, I guess we'll find out. It is interesting that you mentioned the authors because that is something that I've done as well. If I know that, I've dearly loved, I know H.G. Perry's been on a couple of books that I picked up. Heather Fawcett I've seen on a couple of books I picked up. So like I think I've done that more as I've gotten into reading more, as I've gotten into BookTube. I think that I do recognize some of my favorites, and that definitely is a factor in what I pick up. I think that you and I differ in, so like you say you like to go in blind. I think I am seeking out books that I know I'm going to like, and that's why I do a little
Mm.
bit more digging.
Mhm.
And so I think I'm a little bit more judgmental as I'm reading through synopses, however you say it, to try and figure out, am I going to waste my time by picking up this book? And so that's maybe something I need to evaluate in myself. I should be a little bit more adventurous and try some more things, get out of my comfort zone a little bit more.
Well, it's interesting because we access books very similarly. Both you and I, we rely on the library. So more often than not, we don't have this risk of spending money on a title that we aren't going to like. We both also, DNF without too
Yeah.
much fear or hesitation. So it is interesting that even though arguably we kind of read similarly, we look at a book cover, look at a synopsis, and we just investigate the title differently before we enter. So that is interesting, and shows that just because we're similar in other ways, that we still have differences to discover about each other. On that note, let's shift gears and let's read the synopsis for the Hitchcock Hotel. Danny, take it away.
I will. Let's see. Alfred Smedel is not your average Hitchcock fan. He is the founder, owner, and manager of the Hitchcock Hotel, a sprawling Victorian house in the White Mountains dedicated to the master of suspense. There, Alfred offers his guests round the clock film screenings, movie props, and memorabilia in every room, plus an aviary with 50 crows. To celebrate the hotel's first anniversary, he invites his former best friends from his college film club for a reunion. He hasn't spoken to any of them in 16 years, not after what happened. But who better than they to appreciate Alfred's creation and to help him finish it? After all, no Hitchcock set is complete without a body.
Ooh. It just sounds so good. It sounds so interesting. I'm really hoping that we get a lot of like Hitchcock references, and even I would say that I have some experience with Hitchcock. I haven't, seen all of his canon, but what I also love is that there'll be some references I recognize and some that will just make me probably want to go watch that movie. So I think that this will be fun. What's your experience with Hitchcock, by the way?
I have very little experience with Hitchcock. Honestly, I probably wouldn't even recognize if it was Hitchcock versus just something that, I've seen at some point in time. So that will be interesting, the difference in perspectives there to see which references you pick up, and me just along for the ride. I think it's gonna be fun. I'm excited. The birds, the aviary is super creepy. The fact that he's inviting I love how it said his former best friends. I'm like, "Why are you inviting them? Why are they
Yeah.
here?" And of course, the ending statement that it's not complete without a body. Hmm. I also love that our main character's name is Alfred.
Yes, me too. And that's just like a fun little nod to Alfred Hitchcock, obviously. And I think and his last name Smedle is just, I feel like I have an image of him in my head. And I don't, even though we don't have really a description of what he necessarily looks like. The aviary is such a fun nod to like The Birds, which is actually a short story by Daphne du Maurier for those interested. And so I'm imagining we're going to get that. I have seen Vertigo. I'll say that. And so I'm wondering if there's going to be some imagery regarding stairs, like spiral staircase, fear of heights, and vertigo in that type of sense. And yeah, I'm intrigued by the fact that this is a secluded setting too. It's in the mountains.
Yeah.
So that's a lovely trope that I always enjoy. The expectation of a body, maybe revenge. Is that what we're thinking the angle is going to be as far as what had happened? Or is it more a situation? I feel like sometimes when one character who is obviously quite successful, owns a business, owns a hotel, brings other people, to their business to basically brag, it can be that where they're trying to say, look how successful I've been, or it's more of a revenge plot because what happened 16, it said 16 years since they've interacted. Why are these people saying yes to this invitation, by the way? Who does that? I'd be like, I don't know you anymore. That's really weird. No,
Yeah.
I would not go.
No, thanks. I don't need to come to your creepy hotel. Now, it does sound like his friends were also fans of Hitchcock. And so
Mm.
at least that's what I gathered because it said who best to enjoy it than them. But
Mm.
maybe that's also just because of their history.
Yes, it could be a nod to the crime or the incident that may have happened, nearly 2 decades ago. It also is interesting that this is the second book that has reminded me of other media. We ended up having some of this with The Day of the Triffids, but I know that there is a game out there, like a video game that it's not, it's not very good. It's well known, the company's well known for not being like great with bugs and having issues and not really making a storyline that makes sense. I think it's called Dark Anthology is the video game company. And the actual game that I'm thinking of, I think it's called The Devil Inside. And it follows this hotel owner who is obsessed with H.H. Holmes.
Right.
And so there's a lot of like H.H. Holmes memorabilia. He was a well known serial killer, and I don't think we ever really fully knew how many victims there were and everything like that. But I'm getting that type of vibe where Hitchcock was not a serial killer, by the way. But by the way, friends, that's not. I don't mean to make that connection, but I see this kind of homage in. We see this a lot. I think that this isn't a concept that's new, but I
Yeah.
do think it's new with Hitchcock at the forefront.
Yeah. I'm excited. I'm excited to see where this goes.
Me too. I just we have high hopes for this one, friends. I feel as though the genre blend season has gone pretty well. We've had some, positive elements, some negative elements, but I will say that of the initial four that we've selected, this is the one I was the most excited for. So, friends, stakes are high for us, I think, for this final finale of season one.
Yes. And speaking of finale, I mean, we need to get to it so we can figure out whether or not our expectations are too high. I'm hoping not, because I think this is the one I am also most excited about out of the books we've chosen so far. So fingers crossed, we love it. We hope that you guys will join us along for the ride. Remember, if you are interested in reading this with us, we will be reading 1/3 of the book throughout the month of April. Every Friday, you can join us. And if you are interested in reading Inkheart with us, that book we will be starting in May.
Yeah, so when we see you next Friday, be sure to have come back having read all of Act One. It's probably going to be about 100-ish pages per section, which works out really well for us. And we can't wait to discuss with you all.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Not Reading for Content. Be sure to check the description for a schedule of our upcoming reads for this season. For reminders and other updates, you can follow the podcast on Instagram at Not Reading for Content. Where else can the listeners find you, Leandra?
I have a booktube and an Instagram. My booktube is at Leandra the TBR0, and my Instagram is at Leandra_the TBR0. How about you, Danny?
I have the same platforms. Both can be found at danny.dabbles. Thanks again for listening. Don't forget to tune in next Friday for our next episode.